Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I think we're getting into a pretty good and deep topic. So
Yeah.
might as well just start recording it.
Yeah, so do you want to recap like what I said real quick or tell me your thoughts on it if we're starting out on this recording?
Well, basically, we're just talking about how people in the first world are more suicidal than people in the third world, and it's a huge problem because we have everything that we need, while third world countries are fighting to survive every single day, and because of that, their instinctual mechanisms are actually preventing them from wanting to kill themselves. They're actually fighting life every single day on the offense. While in first world countries, with everything we already need, so our mentals just wants to create problems out of nowhere, and things that are actually eating us up inside are manifesting out of themselves, because life has just been so easy that it's trying to create drama, unnecessary drama, and then people just end up killing themselves.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, there are a lot of people going through this mental torture. The thing is, like, if your physical existence becomes solved to a degree and you always have food and you always have shelter and you always have clothing and you always have maybe at least a few people in your life who give a shit to a decent degree or whatever, like, your physical existence is pretty much solved for the moment. You're not in a life or death physical circumstance anymore. You're in the office trying to meet this quota or something, and it's a different way to live. You're not tapped into your moment to moment survival instincts. You might want to kill yourself, but a lot of people, they might be on the brink of suicide. And am saying this as from the perspective of someone who's been suicidal in deep, crazy states of suffering many, many times. I repped that shit out just as well as probably almost anyone, I think. Like on the mental planes and spiritual planes of suffering, I paid my dues. I'll say that. But at the end of the day, I think if someone's on that edge of suicide and a lion walks in the room ready to rip them to pieces physically, they're probably still gonna run away from that lion. That's my guess. I think it's pretty realistic. I think my position is the base realistic position. Is that even on the brink of absolute suffering and suicide, when the lion comes into the room, most people will probably run, try to survive in that moment. They're not going to be like, oh, yeah, life sucks so much. I might as well let it suck to the max while I'm in this state and getting ripped to pieces physically with my intestines flying out. No, they're going to run, bro. And that's the thing. Like, so once your physical survival gets sort of solved, the ego structure is only then gonna move on to the mental plane where it fights those fucking demons. And then, wait, there's more. Then eventually you might experience enough mental, normal sort of suffering. And then you go to like spiritual planes of suffering and torture and torment. Um, there is a lot of suffering out there, but what all this is bringing to mind for me is that in most moments, most human beings, not even on a mental or spiritual level, and not on a physical level, not on any level really, are they actually in any dire problem. If you really look at life, most people these days aren't in a dire problem this split second that must be solved. And that opens up the door to uh, it's a word that it's a Pali word that I've seen described in like Buddhist contexts, and I'm going to try to pronounce it. I believe this is correct. It should be Papanka or something like that. Um, it basically means one of the meanings, one of the translations for these Pali words talking about these different aspects of awakening and stuff. They can have a lot of different meanings and be really complex and beautiful words, but translating them to modern English sometimes doesn't go straightforward. So there can be many translations for a word to just show kind of the picture of what it was meant to be. But like this one of the meanings is mental proliferation. It's sort of like a fire of suffering and ideas and beliefs and attachments that explodes out of a person's psyche. And it creates all these webs of suffering everywhere. All these beliefs. Man, my life sucks. That's a belief. Like, this is a problem. Whatever the problem may be, my car is broken down. That's still also a belief. It's an attachment. Like, even the extreme examples can be penetrated through and the suffering can be erased, even in some extreme cases. But like for most people's moment to moment experience, it's not that horrible. You just have to stop convincing yourself it's horrible and also develop the skill of getting outside of the whole mental plane of problems anyway. You move beyond that and you can be in a state where you're not attached to the activities of the mind, where you're not sucked into those stories, where you're not sucked into that mess of horrible negative interpretations that most people call their ego and their mind and their even their brain to an extent. I mean, that's the physical part of it. But like they just say they're in crazy states of suffering all the time and they say there's this reason why my life sucks, this one, this one, this one. And whenever you enter into that type of a stream of thought, any sort of negative interpretation on reality, you are inviting yourself to go on a beautiful ride of suffering bullshit. And you don't need to go down there. You don't need to go down that path. You simply don't. You can just stop this crazy attached, identified bullshit that you're creating in your mind. You can stop that. You actually have the power. If you and I'm saying like die, you probably understand like yeah, you have control over your mind, but like to other people, I'm just saying you have the power to turn this mental stuff in your favor. Like you really do if you want it and if you learn the ways to do it. You can do that. It's actually not as crazy hard as you might think. It takes a little bit of, care to actually improve your experience. You have to do something. It doesn't just completely automatically happen, I don't think would be accurate to say. But there is a practice to get control of these crazy suffering, fabrications that you create in your mind. Like there are so many ways out, and I think a lot of people are missing out because they go through their lives trying to solve the problem of suffering through every other way than the way that will work. Um, and I think the way that will work most reliably for in the moment getting out of suffering is going to be something really similar to Buddhism, like other spiritual systems work as well, but Buddhism as a system was specifically made for the purpose of getting rid of suffering in all of existence was always the goal. And it's been a method to do that, kept safe for thousands of years, kept safe for the human species to use at a later time. Get out of suffering now. Like, that's what it was for. And you can get out of suffering in many different ways. It doesn't have to be Buddhism, but it was expressly designed for that. And yeah, I thought I knew what Buddhism was for several years. And then I actually started to get into some rare Buddhist states that produce rare and deep Buddhist insights, or insights quite aligned with Buddhism. And it showed me that I had no idea what Buddhism was before, even though I had been learning about it on and off for like several years.
Mhm.
I had no fucking clue what it was. And I think so many people out there talking about it's not just Buddhism, it's any spiritual system, unless you've gone deep into it and really hit some deep levels that, um, you know, might be respectable in a sense, like as far as progress goes for many people. Like, let's say you get to a certain level of realization in any spiritual system, you then have the ability to actually judge to a degree the value of that system. Like, until you've actually gotten deep, I don't care if Christianity, like, to someone, they think it's wrong, for example, but they've never actually tried it. I don't think that's a solid way for us to go through reality, is to look at these other spiritual systems, whatever one it may be, and make judgments before actually going through the process. Because if anyone's gotten to a deep point in any sort of spiritual line of development, they've probably seen into at least their own path, but maybe other spiritual systems to a deep level at times. And then you start to see, oh shit, this was way more than I thought it was. For years, for my whole life, I had no clue what this stuff was. And I say that can happen with a lot of different spiritual systems, maybe all of them, maybe. Um, but it's like, yeah, there's so much that can be done on the spiritual front of development. It's really just like, if you want to get out of suffering or you want to have a better life, I feel like there is sort of guarantee there. You put in enough time, you put in enough effort, it will eventually become worth it. By the time you're having the experience that's been enhanced by that practice, like, it will eventually be worth it. I think it's almost a guarantee if someone really gave it their all spiritually. I think it's going to work out that way for people. Or at least I think it's probably the best shot you've got for most people. Like, to actually overcome suffering in your own life and to be one with experience without resistance. That's a beautiful thing, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with pretty much everything you said. Especially when you talk about the material plane to the mental plane to the spiritual plane. And what I could just think about was the microcosm affects the macrocosm affects the microcosm. Right.
Yeah. And I think something that will help most people's depression, um, is exercise. Because a lot of us who have depression in the world are in these first world country scenarios where things are mostly solved for us on a physical basis. And if we aren't using our bodies in a rigorous way, I think it allows a door for an extra probability to be in suffering to come in. I think we are physical organisms as human beings. Like, I think there's actually a part of reality that makes sense in. Like, we actually do have bodies in a sense, and training that body or putting it under a sort of stress to at least partially simulate the sort of things our bodies were designed to do and handle. Um, I think like getting a really solid exercise routine, whatever sport or type you want to do, cardio, lifting, you know, bike riding, swimming, rock climbing, like CrossFit, strongman, it doesn't really matter. I just think when you tap into that physical element of your being, in rigorous ways, it can be really fucking good for you, mentally and spiritually as well, I think. Creating a great balancing effect. Because I mean, I feel like if you're like under full exertion in any sport, like really peak performance for your body, and you've been training your body, so it's not just peak performance for someone who sucks. It's peak for performance for someone who's actually like got a decent level of capability in some physical domain. You've trained, and it's like you're really going all out. In that moment of all out effort, you tap into that sort of survival reality, in a deep way. I mean, like, if you're going at 100% effort on, I mean, I just love how I'm tying this in to talk about it, but it makes sense. If you're going into an all out effort on a squat, for example, or any lift that has some challenge to it, and you're doing an all out effort, like a full body sort of movement, like the squat, with like a heavy weight, you're I think that activity in your life is going to take you further from suffering and suicide than, not doing it. Like if you don't have any physical training, or it could be running your fastest mile of all time, dude. I mean, you want to talk about a great portal into deepened spiritual experience. Whether you're a normal person or you have some spiritual practice behind you, if you want to have a deep spiritual experience, I think an all out physical exertion increases that probability. Because instead of like leaving your physical element of existence idle to just, exist and be, you're actually using it to improve it, the system itself, the physical limb of your being. You're tapping into that true nature a little bit on a more explicit level. And I think it just makes you fucking want to live a bit. Like when you're struggling and you're like kind of like fucking anxious about to do a lift because of how fucking heavy it is and the type of brutal movement that it might be in. Um, I feel like most people aren't suicidal in that moment. They're like, "Oh shit, bro." Like this weight is going to fucking crush me if I don't kill it. If I don't perform perfectly right now. This is a fuck ton of weight on my back. Like it's just being in those physical sort of states where you're in that fastest mile ever that you've ran or whatever, and you're just pushing it to your physical limit. Or it could be fighting like MMA or something. Like I think these type of experiences can often be really deeply emotional and spiritual for people, even people without a spiritual background. I think sometimes just the intensity of these states can bring about some really interesting stuff in direct experience for a person.
It just makes me think of Joe Rogan because he speaks about how he likes to create his own suffering in the gym.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, man, I feel like David Goggins is like the king of that.
Yeah,
Like,
that was the second guy I was thinking
man,
of too.
following David Goggins stuff hardcore for a couple months, man, that was an experience right there. That changed my fucking life. That showed me a whole different side of myself. Like, yes, you really can work out 6 times a week and get 45,000 steps in a day on 2.5 to 3 hours of sleep, and run a business and, work full time. Like I said, gym like 5 days a week and cardio one day. And at a certain point, I just was like, fuck it. Like, the weather's good. I'm just gonna ride my bike to work and like get a like cardio workout in on the way there and back. Like sometimes like riding in the rain and shit, like listening to David Goggins fucking podcasts and audiobooks, and then like hyped up like heavy metal music and shit, like pumping me up like 24/7, almost like living in the sympathetic nervous system.
That sounds like a great fucking time.
When you realize that you can fucking do that, running like 7 miles, like just at like 2:30 a.m. You're about to start your workout, and then you just hit a block emotionally. Like some shit happened in your life, and you're just like, fuck it, man. I can't do this lift. I'm gonna run for 10 minutes. You go outside, you end up putting in a David Goggins podcast with Jay Shetty, where Jay Shetty's talking about when he trained to like potentially be a monk or something. Like
Mhm.
he was considering becoming a monk or whatever and did the training.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like how hardcore it was, and David Goggins, and it was like a spiritual like shadow work, deep ass David Goggins podcast, bro. That shit changed my life. I was running at night, and I had just gotten in an argument with my best friend. Um, Dude that I had more in common with than any person I've ever fucking met on an objective level. Like we just had such similar lives, and just we were fucking best friends. And I went for a run because I was hitting like a wall. Like I went to go do my first set of squats, and I just like hit a fucking wall mentally and emotionally, like because I was in an argument with him, and like it was a pretty strong one, and it was related to the David Goggins stuff. Running in that sympathetic nervous system mode can make you kind of be a dick sometimes, because you're just that blunt and straightforward, and you're in such a jacked up fucking mind state 24/7. It is ridiculous, man. Um, where your mind goes when you're in that other side of your nervous system, the sympathetic, that fight or flight type of state, you're just living in some degree of that, like all the time. It's fucked up. But like, I went for a run. I ran like 7.5 miles. I had only ran like a mile or two like in the weeks before that, and it was like 2 a.m. I had worked like a full day, um and I just fucking ran 7 miles, and I ended up listening to that fucking David Goggins like podcast about like suffering and shadow work and overcoming like the dark shit and improving yourself. And I ran to the old high school that I went to, um where I was where I was fucking misinterpreted as like being a threat to the school in my first manic episode. Like people thought I was gonna actually like physically hurt people. I didn't ever say that. It's just like you end up going like crazy, and then like oneness mode, like out of nowhere, didn't do any drugs, like and you just start saying strange shit to people, and you're on another fucking level of consciousness no one around you is at. No one around you has been at
Mhm.
that type, like mania. Like they thought I was gonna be like a school shooter or something. Like the cops literally came to my parents' houses and made them put up like kitchen knives, and like my dad had to get a gun safe. He had to buy a expensive gun safe just to keep like his hunting rifles and stuff up, so I wouldn't have access, because they thought I was gonna be like a physical threat. Very ironically, in a very sad way, at that time that like the community was worried that I was like some threat or something, I was feeling for once in my life love, like in my heart and my whole being and experience. I was having like my first love awakening, and I awakened to like oneness, and it was at this time that just because of the really troll sort of like personality I had at the time and the crazy state that I was in, people misinterpreted all kinds of stuff I was saying. I probably was appearing pretty fucking manic and crazy in my speech and shit and looked a lot different. Acted way different than before. Like a switch just flipped in me. Literally. Like a flip or a switch just flipped all of a sudden and I changed into a completely different person. I had never been before, never known before, and no one else did either. It was a very scary thing for people. People don't realize how much of an effect a radical change in your own state of consciousness can affect like a bunch of people. Like we're not programmed as human beings to be that accepting of the really fucking strange. We might think that we are okay with strange or weird stuff. We're really not. Most people, like you see an actual person in a psychotic state of consciousness where they're in that much of their own state of consciousness that it's too unique from ours that we can't fucking communicate with them. That's the idea. When you're in that fucking state, like you are the state. There's no thing you can do to stop it. Like, but like anyway, like everybody was like, it was a really traumatic thing. Like I was basically like kind of like exiled from the community, like on a certain level for a while. I couldn't go to my school in person. I had to take like online classes the last half of my senior year. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I have like the first like signs of a serious mental illness and it gets diagnosed and then like that's what happens to me. But anyway, like in the middle of the night, I ran back to my high school in the middle of the night, like listening to this David Goggins podcast on like fighting your demons and like he says people never go to those dark places or the places they got humiliated or and he said it's in those places and those times when you see like the weakest like parts of yourself like those that's what really makes a difference. It's going back into those places you felt uncomfortable where shit went wrong or whatever like and dude, it was just so man, the David Goggins shit, it really fucking changed shit for me for a while. But it showed me a whole different side of myself, like being able to do all these physical feats and working all the time. And like he says, like, bro, like, you know, in his book, like you could paraphrase it a different sort of way, like, all right, like if you want a better life, like quit being a bitch. You can, do your cardio on the way to work. Like you can literally run or ride a bike on your way to work. Get a workout in there. Like you can work out outside. You can go to school. You can get a job. You can do all the shit that you need to do. Like it's actually within you. If you turn on that sort of beast mode switch within yourself and you go into that like survival mode. Fuck. It's crazy.
Yeah, I can resonate with that story actually, because I've been going to a church that I used to go to when I was very young.
Yeah.
I've been going back there for like the past few years. One of the big reasons or motivators that caused me to go back was to actually fight one of my demons or face some of my demons as a younger child, because I got bullied by a lot of kids there when I used to go as a kid, and that actually had a huge.
Why did they bully you?
I do not know. Maybe it's because I was a very weird or outgoing kid with like a big personality. I don't know. I don't know what it was, right? But maybe I was just a vulnerable kid that seemed to be able to be easy for people to pick on or kids to pick on. And That's just what happened. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, really. Um, I was in, so there's a backyard in the church where people are able to hang out and even play basketball.
Yeah.
And a bunch of these kids was bullying me, and they bullied me so hard that I went to hit in a car. So it's actually a parking lot as well, where people who attend the church are able to park their cars, because there's a lot of families who go to that church. And there was a car where there was a few people, adults, in there talking to each other, and I just went in there and hid in there for like the longest time because I was afraid to go out and socialize with the kids still. And I just felt safe in the car because it was a safe environment with 3 other adults in there. I was just hanging out with adults in there.
Damn. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to face our demons.
Yeah, man. I legit like it was the first time in months, like maybe almost a year, since I had felt true suffering in my heart. Um, and in that moment that I had the disagreement with my friend, not that it was suffering anymore in the old sense, but the sensation of like this heartbreaky suffering that can happen in the heart region, like um it was really deep and potent, and I just kind of sat there and absorbed it, and that was like the block that I was talking about, the mental block. Um, but yeah, then I literally ran to another town, to my old high school, in the middle of the night, listening to this. I all I had was my phone and my AirPods. I didn't have my wallet. I didn't have my like keys or like nothing, dude. Like I legit like left everything at the gym and just started fucking running. And that podcast drove me to like go back to that place where I basically was humiliated and felt like the weakest and smallest and worst that I ever did, like on a social sort of level almost.
Mhm.
Um, that's one of the things that people don't maybe always think about with bipolar disorder, but at the end of the day, a lot of the time, just the states of consciousness that you're going to be thrown into because of the condition are going to alienate you from the society and culture you're in. You just won't fit in some of the time, and it can be really humiliating and damaging on a social level for a person. And like, I've had to face that so many times. Like myself coming out uninhibited authenticity in a crazy state of consciousness that I didn't intend to get into and I didn't really have at the time the ability to get out of. Um, like it just did so much damage. So like like one of these places I went to at that time when after I think it was after I did that run or whatever, but like I went back for I went back to my old job where I basically quit because I had, because of my bipolar disorder, really. Like the things that brought about like led to me like basically like ghosting my job that I had been at for years. Like it's just and like I went back into that place of employment like to talk to one of my coworkers and friends about something, like it was nothing big, but just being back in that place and feeling that like a lot of ways it's like just judgment for yourself
Mhm.
and how you were in a situation, but maybe even you feel like that sort of thing like about the other people that are there too, like you just feel like, man, like I really uh had a weak sort of moment here.
And this happened to you how old were you? You remember?
That with like that job or the first
Or,
manic episode or what?
or the incident where you went back to your school when you was young?
When I ran back to the school, it was like in August maybe.
And how old were you when that incident happened?
I was 26. Now I'm 27, just a few months older.
No, not when you went back to the school, but like.
But the incident at the school, that was when I was 18,
Okay, okay.
my senior year. The first semester.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a bunch of manic episodes after that, in and out of the hospital. Um, but it really humbled me. I used to be kind of an arrogant prick, at least was like my identity. Like I always thought I was like better than people. And then like I was humbled by being put in the psych ward so many times. I was forced to be around other people and realize that at the current time, my social standing, who I was as a person in that moment, the role I was in, was I was a psych ward patient. And sometimes like the worst one in there. Um, a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And you just see all these other people who have had really shitty lives in ways, or like things happen to them that really like threw them off course and made them go through the worst periods in their lives. Like you see everybody else at their ultimate low. Like um but it's crazy because like the bipolar disorder really is what sparked my whole spiritual journey, so I can't be mad at it. I'm pretty damn happy it was there.
So what do you think is causing these people to have such psychotic reactions?
Well, a lot of mental illness is actually genetic. Like my grandma had bipolar disorder. My brother has a schizoaffective disorder, so a form of schizophrenia. And like yeah, mental illness can run in families, so it can be, and sometimes people will have the sort of genetic background for mental illness, but their environment doesn't trigger it, or certain environmental factors don't sort of flourish that part of your genetic makeup to
Mhm.
where someone gets there. But a lot of people kind of have latent genes that just haven't been expressed yet for mental illness. But they're just waiting for the right environmental trigger to come out and truly manifest. But like I think a lot of it, like if I'm speaking specifically about bipolar disorder, um, it's or even in a lot of ways like this relates to like things like schizophrenia and plenty of other mental illnesses too. A lot of it's just genetic. The person was quite literally born that way. And we hardly ever see like elements of a person being born a certain way as being like evil, like, but this, humans really hate insanity and psychosis and madness. It's one of the most threatening things to people. Like, yeah, it can just scare people a lot to see another human being all of a sudden become like internally like a completely different sort of entity in front of your eyes. And they're just acting at a polar opposite of normal society. Like a lot of it's just genetic, but then behavior comes into it a lot too. Like you do have the ability to not be a jackass with if you have mental illnesses. Like you have the ability to get control over that, I think, for most people, even in some really severe cases. My case was a really severe case. Like it just, I feel like that's an objective thing. I had a pretty damn severe case of bipolar disorder type 1 with psychotic features.
But I mean, look at you now, right? Like, if someone met you now, they would have never guessed that.
You think so?
I mean, from the talks that I've had with you, I mean, like, if you can't talk to someone on a consistent basis like that, who has just met you out of the blue and streets, like, I don't think they would have guessed
Well,
it.
man, I think you're probably right. Most people, yeah, they would see me as a sane person these days if they met me. But and yeah, it means a lot to hear that from someone, like, not really prompting you to say that. You just brought it up.
Yeah.
But like, because I was not that way for a long time.
No, but that's why
Everybody knew that I was the like crazy motherfucker. That's just like, whether I like wanted it or not, no matter what I did, like, by so many people, I was viewed as the crazy motherfucker.
Yeah, but that's why I asked, like, why do you think this is the case for these people? Because I, because of our talks about spirituality and stuff, right? Like, I don't think that is who someone truly is.
Yeah, it's not. But you know,
And I wonder,
there's a lot of judgment there for people who have mental illness, because they might just naturally get into a state that is out of their control, and they didn't intend for it to happen. They didn't do anything. At least, like, the first time it happens, generally, it just happens to them. They were just living their lives, and a certain stress point triggers the expression of this gene that then is there for the rest of your life.
let me ask you a question. What do you think is scarier? Someone who knows that they're crazy, or someone who doesn't know that they're crazy?
Well, I think it would be someone who doesn't know that they're crazy, but their crazy has finally started to come out. I think someone who really knows that they're crazy, like, they at least aren't, under any illusions that they're normal. So they're usually gonna understand a bit more of how to navigate shit. They at least know that you're kind of like a vampire with a target on your back in society. Like, that's legit how it feels, man. You will legitimately be captured and uh, and put in a sort of prison environment. Not prison, not jail, but like the mental equivalent, the fucked up mental person equivalent of that. Like, there were people who were in the psych wards with me at times, and they would complain about how a time that they were in jail or whatever, there were better conditions than in the psych ward we were in. Like, one thing, this guy was complaining in the first psych ward I went to, and the one that I've been to the most times in my hometown. He was complaining about how, at least in jail, they gave them shower shoes. But this, like, you're getting, like, sprayed, like, at high pressure by this, like, lukewarm cold water, like, to take a shower. But and it's just kind of not a nice way to take a shower. Let's just put it that way. But like, the guy was complaining because at least in prison they gave you shoes so you didn't, hopefully, like, transfer athlete's foot and shit. But here they didn't even have that. Like, in legit, like, you're eating it's better food than prison for sure. It's actually sometimes decent food, but like, you have like a certain set menu you can eat. There's not really much you can do. You can read some books they have there, or color, or I don't know. But you're in like a place with blank walls, and it's kind of dark a lot of the time, and there's no freedom there. There's really not much freedom there. Um, And it's all because of your mental state that happens to you internally that you just lose control of. And it sucks, but yeah, a lot of the time it feels like being a vampire, like with a target on your back in society. Like you are seen as a threat, even if you don't mean any harm. Like imagine a vampire who's just like a good guy. He doesn't eat people. He gets some blood from like a hospital. Really upstanding guy for a vampire. Doesn't fucking matter to anybody. The guy's still a vampire. We're gonna fucking capture his ass. He's a threat. That's how it feels. Like, it's crazy, bro.
Whereas we have people running amok in the world who actually, people who are controlling the world,
Harming people,
actually crazy,
exploiting people,
right,
killing people.
right. Like they're the ones who actually should be in the psych.
No, I think psych wards are still a good thing. I think usually by the time a person's in a psych ward, it's probably a good thing that they're there.
When it escalates to that level.
Yeah. But, like, yeah, there's just a lot of judgment, and a lot of it is for people who are just in a circumstance that the people judging them have not been in. And really, no one's been in that circumstance. No one's been in that exact direct experience as a human being like they have. So we don't understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
We can try, but we never really will understand fully what another person's suffering is like, you know?
Yeah. I guess there's always two sides of a coin, right? I guess to play devil's advocate, like it's to prevent them from having
Getting even worse for themselves and for other people.
Yeah.
Because it can be dangerous to the world, or at least like the person might harm themselves or whatever. But yeah. So there's a reason why it's there, and it's not like it shouldn't be there. But it's a harsh reality about the way the world works, and probably the best way for the world to work for right now. Like,
well, maybe they're actually like more in tune with the universe, I think.
I will say the percentage of people who have serious mental health issues who are interested in awakening is higher than the percentage of people who care and know about awakening who I know have like some mental like stuff that they've had to work through that was really serious, sometimes like actual mental illness, or at least a lot of trauma or whatever. Like those people seem prone to do spirituality and get far in it, compared to people who don't have that sort of background. It seems like the suffering is like the fuel for the rocket for awakening to take off a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? Because they're trying.
Who's gonna want to get out of suffering more than the person who's suffered maximally time and time again? Like if they're still here, eventually they're gonna be like, I'm sick of this. I'm finding a way out. And if they find a way to a path that will actually work to get rid of it, they might just go all the way. They might just be that single-mindedly obsessed with it that they'll fucking get somewhere. That's what happened to me. I don't know exactly where I'm at. I'm not going to place myself in some system or say I'm this or that in comparison to other people. All I know is that my transformation in my own life, my own experience has been tremendous. And I could have never believed how good it could get, how much better it could get. But I think the people who have really gotten hit hard by suffering a lot, they can have that extra fire and desire to get rid of suffering that helps them in a spiritual sort of way, I think.
I agree. This is a great episode.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully we'll upload this onto YouTube.
Yeah. And this whole spiel that we've been on now was at one point, started by a conversation about Nicolas Cage. So pretty good podcasting skills, I think. I'm not mad about it.
Yeah.
How we got here from Nicolas Cage, I mean, it was a journey.
I'm gonna stop recording now then.